It's the People's Voice with the Conservative Commentator Adam Stevenson on the Community Channel on TVU. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing pretty good. James. Today we have a very special guest. He's a friend of mine from Calgary. His name is Artur Pawlowski. He's the pastor of Street Church in Calgary. And today we're going to be talking about the erosion of our fundamental freedoms and values surrounding those fundamental freedoms and our charter rights and that sort of thing here in Canada.
Okay. So, I'm just going to go with Pastor Pawlowski, if you don't mind. And, I think that you've got a history and level of experience that would add a lot of context to our viewers. It's the first time they're meeting you. So if you could just give us a little bit of background, and then let's get right after it.
I grew up under communist dictatorship in Poland under the Iron Curtain. So firsthand, I have witnessed what communism and socialism does to a nation. It destroys it from within, from inside out, a disaster. I witnessed in 1981 an uprising as a little kid. I've seen the power of unity. I have seen what happens when people take it to the streets with a unified voice and say to the corrupted government, no more. So I grew up in Poland under communism. And then in 1990, we emigrated to Greece. In Greece, we started a business. And for 5 years, we were applying to come to Canada for a better life, for freedoms. I mean, if you look at my story, I emigrated not so much for bread, because I was a very successful businessman in Greece and in Poland. I came to Canada because I wanted freedoms. I wanted to be a free man. I believe in freedom. I believe that everyone is created equally under God, and it should be equal under the law. And in my country, my old country, this was denied to us. So we as a family, we were hungry and thirsty for a country that would give us those freedoms. And I remember a meeting in embassy in Greece, in Athens, with a Canadian representative. And he said to us, come to Canada. No one will persecute you there. No one will hunt you down just because you're Christians. We want young people like you. We want business people. We want Christians to come to our nation, and you will be free to pursue your dreams. So we packed our stuff, sold everything we had, and we came to Calgary, Alberta. I call it my little Siberia, if you know what I mean. So we emigrated here and we started business again. We have become very successful, but God touched my heart. I was a typical businessman. I pretty much cared about me, I and myself, until one day God touched my heart, changed my life from upside down to right side up. And I started to work with the homeless people. Out of the all, I grew up with politicians. I grew up with very extremely wealthy people. I worked for the wealthiest people on the planet Earth. My friends were ministers and chief of police and famous singers. And then I end up on the streets working with the street people, with the homeless, with the prostitutes, with the druggies, with alcoholics. And that was a shock for me. But I started to learn about their problems. I started to see what the need is. And I started a ministry that is called simply Street Church, Church on the Streets, church for those types of people. And we registered that organization in 2005. And since then, it is operational in Calgary. And we started about 40 churches like this in other countries on few continents. And that's what I do. That's what I do full time. I feed the poor, but at the same time, I'm telling them that their tomorrow can be different than their today, that there is hope, and that hope has a name. That name is Jesus Christ.
That's awesome. Any comment to that, Adam?
Nothing but smiles hearing that. I learned a few things about Art that I didn't previously know about his business background. I did know that he came from Poland and that he he grew up and experienced the erosion of freedoms there, and experienced living through communism in Eastern Europe. And that's part of why I invited him to come on the show and talk about what's happening in Canada now, because he can add that experience to our viewers.
So it's a very fascinating and interesting, but also evidently bold and courageous way to bring the gospel forward, and that is on the street and to the homeless. Because if the gospel has any salt, if there's any power to that form of godliness, then there it will be most evident. So it's an honor to have you, and to hear of your global ministry is fascinating. We could speak about that, But let's talk about Calgary, and if you'd like, you could talk about your other ministry work, or you can talk specifically about what you see as a minister, a man of God, a prophetic voice in the sense that the spirit of prophecy is a testimony of Jesus standing on the street. You got the ears and eyes of 20,000 people here. What can you say?
Well, let me give you a little bit of history, because I think that's what Adam would like the listeners and the viewers to hear. When I started this ministry, I started to work with the homeless in 1999. I took the first homeless man out of the streets after 7 years of him sleeping in a dumpster. I took him in under my wings. I hired him in my company. I gave him food. I gave him money to go back to Poland for the first time in his life to see his grandchildren. I rented an apartment for him. And I have been able to give him the last 2 years of his life. In his words, he says those were the happiest years of his life. He died of cancer after, of course, all those decades of abusing his body. But I started to work with the poor. After this experience, I started to take them to the church. I took them to dinners. I took them to different Christian festivals. And I started to know what they're struggling with. It's a very complicated issue. It's not as easy as people would think. Hey, get a job. Half of them are mentally ill. They were traumatized, beaten, raped, especially women. I've never met a woman on a street that was not raped repeatedly as a child and growing up. So I started to work with them. In 2003, I ended up on the streets working with a ministry, joining a ministry that was feeding the homeless and at the same time preaching the gospel. So that's what I started to do. I joined them. And then 2004, 2005, I was working with them, and there was no problems with authorities, no problems with police or bylaws. They would see us, of course. Sometimes they would come and ask, what are you doing? And we would explain what we were doing, feeding the people and giving them hope. The police understood that what we have been doing, it was a good thing. At least for those few hours, those sometimes extremely dangerous people will not whack anyone's head, would not fight with knives and all kinds of different things. So they liked it. And then 2005, believe it or not, and this may be a shock to your viewers, I was approached by two people that I recognized them from my business. I rented an office in Bankers Hall. If you're from Calgary, you know that's one of the most prestigious places in the city of Calgary. I had an office there. I started a magazine that was the most successful magazine during that year in the province of Alberta. Then I had my other businesses run from there. So I would recognize those people. They were working for oil company, and they were homosexuals. They would hold their hands, and they would make everyone see that they were homosexuals. But hey, it's free country. I moved to a democracy, not theocracy. So you can do whatever you want as long as you're not breaking the law. And I didn't pay too much attention to them until they showed up at our church. So here is the scenario. We're feeding the poor. There's hundreds of homeless. We have a grill. And then suddenly those two individuals in a suit, in a tie, come to me and they say, we will do everything in our power to shut you down. and they were holding hands, and they took off. So since then, we had no problems with authorities. Newspapers were writing stories about us. You can Google them up. Church growing on the streets. Street church brings hope to the homeless. It's amazing. Miracle after miracle. We took 600 people off the streets within 3 months. We were so successful in reaching those people because we went to their turf. We were with them. I remember when the first time we brought the church in front of drop-in center under the bridge, on my left was about 50 drug dealers, and on my right were the pimps and the prostitutes. And we brought the church in the middle of hell. The neighborhood refused to even go over there. Police was never showing up over there unless there was a murder. And that's where we brought the church, in the darkest place. And we have become very successful to the point that everybody started to recognize that what we're doing is amazing. We started to call it revival, and we did a little documentary to document about what was going on called Revival Hits Calgary. It was amazing. I mean, I was in shock that God was coming in such a powerful way and changing people's lives until the 2005, when those two individuals showed up and they said, we will do everything in our power to shut you down. After that, we started to have bylaw officers. Bylaw officers would show up and they would say, you have no right to do this. Whatever you're doing, it's against the law. You're breaking the law. You're a lawbreaker. Shut it down. Shut the shop, they called it. Shut it down. And I said, listen, I was really confused because I really believed I moved to a free country. You see, in my country, if the government said no, I would be tortured, I would be beaten, and probably murdered somewhere like many other priests and the pastors before me. But in Canada, that's why I escaped Poland. That's why I came here, because we were sick and tired of the abuse of power, of authorities not following the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. You see, people have to understand that Poland, all those years under the occupation of Russia, had a constitution. We were the second country on the planet Earth to have a constitution after the United States of America. And we had that constitution. But no one applied that constitution, and no one respected that constitution. No police, no courts, no government. So there was abuse of power, and that's why we escaped to Greece, and then from Greece to Canada. And here, I'm facing a repetition of history. I see authorities coming to me, and they say, you are a lawbreaker, you're evil man, because why? Because you're feeding the poor, because you don't have a special permit, because you're preaching the gospel, and that's against the law. And I said, you know what? Then the hell with your law. I'm going to stand. And of course, I started to educate myself about the law of Canada. And I encourage every one of you, educate yourself, know your rights, use them or lose them. So I started to read the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I started to read the Constitution, and I was shocked because everything I was doing was within the law of the country. I had my rights. I could do that. So next time bylaws showed up, they brought police officers. And the same scenario. You're a lawbreaker. What you're doing is wrong, blah, blah, blah. We will ticket you. We'll arrest you. So we called the media. And at that time, media were not as biased against the Christians as they are today. And that was a big international story. Even in Russia, they were writing about us. And in China, believe it or not, Korea, about this situation. I end up on the news every second day. And at the beginning, the media were on our side. What are we doing wrong? We're just feeding the poor. But slowly, the pressure started to come. Politicians started to get involved. At that time, we had the mayor, Dave Ronconia. He got involved. Then we had few aldermen, Joe Ceci, alderman at that time. Then he became a minister under NDP. Then Drew Farrell, that forged documents. She actually started to forge complaints. And from her office, I didn't know that at that time, but from her office, she was encouraging people to complain about this ministry, to create false complaints. And that's how the narration started. There are people complaining about you. You're too loud. You're congregating the poor in this area. It becomes extremely dangerous for the people. Like, listen, no one would come over there. It was hell on earth. But suddenly they were concerned that there's too many homeless over there. And that's how the story was spun. From a hero, I became a zero. I mean, literally. I had 250 volunteers in 7 locations in a city of Calgary, 7 street churches, and then suddenly I was alone. I will never forget few conversations with the pastors and the leaders. I received a phone call, and lawyers from a huge mega church here that were backing us up at the beginning, but not during the fight, they would say, stop doing it. You cannot win with the government. You will not win with the police. You will not win with the bylaws. Just shut down the church, because they will throw a key. They will arrest you and throw a key. And I said, I can't. Because if I do, I will not be able to look in the mirror. We escaped from Poland. I'm not escaping again. It's time to stand up and fight. So I did. I remember Global Television showed up and they asked me this question, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I guess see you next time. I will keep doing. I'll keep feeding the poor, and I will preach the gospel. I will give those people hope. And the next time they showed up, overall, the whole fight was going on for 10 years. Believe it or not, for 10 years, I faced over 300 citations, summons, and tickets. I was the first Canadian ever in a modern history to be arrested in a public place for reading Bible. I was handcuffed, forced to walk backwards, and I faced years of imprisonment for reading the Bible. Not for doing any other crime, just reading the Bible and not using amplification system. I was arrested for reading the Bible to 6 other people in the public park. 6 police officers, police cruisers showed up. I was handcuffed. They almost broke my arm. They roughed me up, and they throw me in jail, facing who knows how long of jail time. It took me a year to fight this one, and $120,000. But I learned a lot through this time. I learned that Canadians do not understand freedoms. They had too good in this country. They didn't come to my aid, even though all over the news I was telling them, if they came for me, they will come for you. It's just a matter of time. If they dare to arrest the pastor just for reading the Bible, they will come for you right as well. They didn't believe me. And
exactly. And now they have. And now they have, right? We see the case of there was a street preacher in Edmonton who was rounded up and fined for preaching during these lockdowns. We see what happened with Pastor David Lynn in Ontario. And, you know, Christian parents and people who hold certain beliefs and have very strong beliefs about these things surrounding, say, homosexuality or transgenderism or Islam or any of these sorts of things. And they don't, you know, they're like, well, listen, you know, you guys can do what you want. This is a free country. You have your rights and freedoms, but don't try and push it on my kids, because I don't want to have any part in that. And then they're coming down with the full weight of the government on these people, trying to tear apart their families, get them to lose their jobs. And it's just like Arthur was saying, right? Our freedoms and rights are something that we need to exercise. It's like a muscle. If you don't, you know, when you work out and you exercise on a regular basis, your muscles grow, they get strong. Our rights and our constitutional freedoms are the exact same, well, not the exact same as your bodily muscle, but it's the same sort of thing. It's a good analogy, right? If you continuously exercise it and exercise it to its fullest capacity and its fullest extent, it's going to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And the power of the government that they hold over the people and try to wield over them will have less resistance. It will be easier to push back against it.
Well, let me put it this way. There's nothing like a vacuum in this world. It's either taken by the darkness or taken by the light. If the light withdraw itself from the darkness takes over. So if you don't exercise your rights, if you're not pushing it, if you're not bringing it into the public square, automatically the enemy takes over. And after a while, what happened to this amazing country is that the enemy looked around and saw the church apathetic, uninterested in politics, not running, not having candidates, not backing candidates up. So the enemy just took over that area of public sphere. Then it took educational system when they said no prayers, no Bible readings in the schools. Then it took after the justice system, 10 Commandments erased, then the Bible kicked out. And now you can swear without the Bible, or you can swear on Quran and etc. I remember there was a prayer at our city hall. Before every council meeting, the mayor would pray. That kicked out pretty much from all of this country, parliament as well. So what happens is the light withdraw itself and then the darkness took over. The most shocking thing for me at that time was the apathy of the Canadians, apathy of the church. I thought that after my arrest, and after that I had many arrests, over 10, I was detained many times. I was over 100 times in courts, over 100 court cases. Sometimes I spent more time in the courts. Some of the trials were as 3 weeks long. Can you imagine if you murder someone, most likely you will have less time in the court system. But if you feed the homeless and you dare to preach the gospel to that person, you will end up in the court system, sitting there as the accused for 3 weeks. It was insanity. I spent more time in the courts and with the lawyers than I spent in the church as a pastor. I mean, it was pathetic. It was unbelievable. And of course, I was vilified by the media. I was called a lawbreaker, troublemaker, all kinds of different things, and harassment. My tickets were from $50 to $10,000 each. I remember one trial, I was facing $300,000 worth of tickets, $300,000 worth of tickets for preaching the gospel and feeding the poor. And that was going on since 2005 to 2015, 10 years. In the meantime, I lost my charitable status. The federal government looked at our cases and decided that because I am political, and you know what they mean by political, they sent me a letter and they said that I expose a strong and negative views about homosexuality, abortion, and divorce, and that is viewed as political. Can you believe that?
What they believe to be negative, right?
Yes.
What they believe to be negative views about those things.
Yeah, but
Right?
whatever negative or positive, they think, and I can show you the letter. I mean, it's insanity. They say that when you talk as a pastor about divorce, about homosexuality, about abortion, you're political. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it is. It is unbelievable. These are moral issues, right? These are moral issues. They're not political issues. They've made them political issues.
That's right.
They've made political issues out of
it. They've become in their pursuit of being inclusive, they've become exclusively inclusive. And that's the danger of special interest politics. And, the NDP in Alberta got elected based on being a workers' party for working men and women. And they squandered the potential of governing in Alberta on behalf of working men and women. Because some of the things they did were, well, whatever. Socialism's tough to define here in Canada. But the politics of special interest made them one and done. They were out, right? So I understand. That's the first time I ever heard it's obvious to me. And when I say these things, no one listens to me. But when they send you a letter and say, as a pastor, if you're talking about these issues, you're political. I totally agree that they were so deluded in their perception of what is political. You look at cultures. Now, we live on this continent now. Like, we live in North and South America. We live here. We all have European roots, but we're of this land now. Okay. And there's time after time after time of civilizations that have risen here, that they became more interested in feathers and flowers than they did in growing rice and chickens, right? That these cultures completely collapsed.
Yeah.
Quickly.
That's happened several times.
And now our politics is not about working men and women. When I read the scriptures, there's lots in there about working men and women, right? Good things. Okay. So, politics about working men and women are congruent with Christianity. But when you bring in flowers and feathers, politics that mean nothing. These issues are important, and you work on the street, so you know issues about gender and LGBTQ and environment. These are totally important, but they're not political, right? And so thank you for saying that. That's one of the first time. You know what, Adam? I want to hear about Pastor Pawlowski's new work. I think it's important. Talk about your new church.
So after fighting with the government for so long, first of all, what they've done successfully to me, they vilified my name. If you Google my name, I'm this great villain, this horrible man. I'm a homophobe. I am transphobe. I am a xenophobe. I am against immigrants. I mean, how ridiculous this is. If you hear my voice, you know I'm emigrated here. My whole family emigrated here. I work with all colors, all backgrounds. The church, Street Church, is a church of many colors and many backgrounds. People are coming from all over. The blacks, the yellows, the reds, and the whites working together for God, for the common good. In our lineups, we have hundreds of people that we feed. We feed thousands of people a week. We feed anyone. Never ever I have denied the food to an individual just because of his background, culture, color, or gender. I mean, if you're a homosexual, I just fed homosexuals yesterday, and they were obvious homosexuals. They even had it on their T-shirts. And I invited them in because they were looking and they were not sure if they can eat because we're Christians. I mean, that's ridiculous. At my table, at my Father's table, everyone is welcome to participate. But you will hear the gospel. It's a church. You come to a church, you come under the umbrella of the preaching. That's just how it is. You don't have to. You can keep walking. But if you decide to stay, I will preach to you and you will hear Christianity. You will hear singing. You will hear prayers. You will hear all kinds of different things.
You will hear what I believe is right and wrong.
You know, you don't have to. I mean, I always said to the people, you don't have to be here. No one is forcing you to be here. You came here and now you want to change what I do. I didn't come to your home. I didn't come to your church. I didn't come to your business to change you. You're coming to me. So that was the biggest problem for those homosexual fascists, I call them, because they are acting exactly like the brown shirts of Adolf Hitler and Mussolini and all those thugs. They will beat you down if you don't submit. They are the most intolerant people. They talk about tolerance. I've never seen more intolerant people in my life. So what we do, we set up a church for the homeless. We feed them at the same time. We pray for them at the same time. We counsel them at the same time. We cry with them. Yesterday, I was on the streets and
Lost him.
Oh, okay. Anyway,
no. There he is.
Well,
yeah.
Coming back.
Okay. So yesterday, a lady came to me and she said, my son just overdosed. He's dead. And she started to cry. So I hugged her and I said, do you need a prayer? She wanted a prayer. We prayed with her. You see, we cry with those that cry. We laugh with those that laugh. And we feed anyone that comes. And what happened after the attacks, 10 years of fights, arrests, Canadians, I'm not beating on you. I'm not punching you. But all of the Canadians ran away. When the authorities started to show up, when the courts started to come and the tickets were getting bigger and bigger, all my colleagues, all my pastors, I looked to the left and to the right, they were nowhere to be found. And the churchgoers, the white churchgoers, they completely disappeared. So I was left with few immigrants holding on the fort. We never ceased to feed the poor, but we were fighting in a court system. I had to remortgage my house 7 times just to be able to pay for the lawyers to keep fighting. And I won. In 2015, after 10 years of fighting, I won the fight. I won my rights. I won my right to preach the gospel in this country and feed the poor, feed the homeless. And I received back all of my permits and my rights. So I decided that I need to educate people how to stand up, how to fight for the rights. I have to start preaching to them, not just to evangelize them on the street. I needed a platform, a pulpit that I can teach people how to be strong as a Christian, how to fight and stand up for your rights. When I can teach history, because I'm telling you, gentlemen, there is a big problem in this country because they do not teach those kids history. But you can learn so much from history. If you know your history, you will not repeat the same mistakes. And that's the whole idea of teaching history.
Yeah.
Don't do what our grandparents did, because if you do, those are the consequences. So that's what I started to do in the church. I teach history. I teach what happened in my country, what happened during the German invasion, what happened during the Roman Empire, what happened during the Babylonian, Persians, and what Jewish people did, Israelites, and how Canada was built, why God blessed it, why do we say glorious and free? You know, we stand on guard for the why, lest we forget, all those different things. And I started a new church in the building where I can teach, because it's very extremely difficult to teach on the streets when it's raining and snowing and you never know what is going to happen. And I started to teach people inside the building. So every Saturday, 10 in the morning in the city of Calgary, if you're in the area, we started a church that we called the Cave of Adullam, the Fortress of Adullam, to teach how to fight, how to stand up. And of course, I'm not talking about violence. I'm not talking about swords and guns. I'm talking about how to be a man, how to be a Christian, how to stand up for your rights, how to teach and educate. Because even the police officers, even the courts, believe it or not, we had to re-educate them, that there is something more powerful than the bylaw. You see, the city of Calgary, they thought that their bylaws are holy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They thought that the bylaw is the ultimate power. So we had to re-educate them and say, no, listen, people, you have your bylaws, but some of your bylaws are unconstitutional. And we had to educate them that there is a higher law called the Constitution, called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And we've done that. We educated them, believe it or not, and here is a cool story that the media never wanted the people to know, that because of me and my fight, the city of Calgary designated 2 places for speakers' corners. You know, when you have in London, the speaker's corner, Calgary had nothing like it. There was no speaker's corner. So I advocated and I fought for many years for Calgary to designate a place for people to be able to express their views, for or against. That's the democracy. That's the freedom. And now we have 2, not 1, but 2. One is by the Western Horses in front of City Hall. There is a plaza over there. That's a designated spot for freedom, for Speaker's Corner. And all kinds of different protests are being conducted over there right now. And then behold, listen to this cool story. Remember, I was arrested in 2006 for reading the Bible. I was arrested in a place called Tompkins Park. Tompkins Park is on 17th Avenue Southwest and 8th Street in the city of Calgary. Do you know that the city of Calgary designated that park as the Speaker's Corner now?
Good. That's fair.
You know,
Excellent.
That's
so,
like an apology.
You know, I was told that those things, if it was not for political correctness, would be called Artur Pawlowski Speaker's Corner. But it's not going to happen because, of course, I'm a very vocal Christian, and the homosexuals will never allow something like this for a Christian and a pastor to be, acknowledged in such a way. But it doesn't matter. I'm happy that we have places now in our city when people can grab a microphone and can go there and say their piece, even if I disagree with their piece.
It is good.
And
it is good.
Now the church is growing. We are able to do marches for Jesus. And this is how the church works. We meet in the morning. We have the worship like in any other church. We have a sermon, of course. After we have a lunch, we eat together. We eat together, we fellowship together, and there are many conversations, what to do, how to do it. We organize different things. And then we go downstairs to the parking lot where we have truckloads of food, and we wait for the community, a local poor community, to come so we can distribute food to them. And the volunteers are coming with their vehicles, and they're taking the food, and they are going to the poor neighborhoods, to their neighbors, distributing the food, especially now in this time of crisis. So that's what we do. And then my baby, the most amazing thing I have ever been able to do is marches, public manifestations of our faith. We will take thousands of people and we will march through the streets. It's called March for Jesus. When we will march, when we will sing, when we will preach corporately, different colors, different churches, different backgrounds, coming together, united as Christians. And then we will go to a place where we have a barbecue and we will feed the poor, and we will eat together, and we'll have more worship and more festivities. This year, because of the COVID, we marched all the way to City Hall when we went to our knees and we asked God to forgive all of us for the sins of this nation. So it was very special, very incredible, and that's what I do full time right now.
Excellent. You know what? We've run out of time, but he leads us in a triumphant procession, and there's a hail of a king in the camp. On the People's Voice with Adam Stevenson, Pastor Artur Pawlowski, only on TVU. Thanks, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for having me.